Colorado Real Estate Exam Part 1 2025, 100 questions with explained answers. Question 1. Which two documents are necessary to establish a legally binding mortgage loan? Promissory note and deed of trust, sales contract and mortgage agreement, title insurance and appraisal report, warranty deed and lease agreement. A mortgage loan requires two distinct legal instruments: the promissory note, which is the evidence of the debt and the borrower's personal promise to repay, and the deed of trust, or mortgage, which is the security instrument that pledges the property as collateral. Question 2. If a buyer defaults on a sales contract after providing $10,000 as earnest money for a $200,000 property, what can the seller do? Return the entire amount to the buyer, keep the entire amount as compensation, deduct expenses and return the rest, distribute it among the agents. Earnest money acts as liquidated damages. If the buyer defaults without a legal excuse, contingency, the seller is typically entitled to keep the deposit as compensation for the time the property was off the market and the breach of contract. Question 3. Surface rights, air rights, and subsurface rights that can be sold separately are known as severable rights, literal rights, owner's rights, riparian rights. Real estate ownership is often described as a bundle of rights. These rights are severable, meaning an owner can sell the oil and gas, subsurface, or the airspace above the land while still retaining the actual surface land. Question 4. What type of easement automatically transfers upon the sale of either the dominant or servient property? Easement by prescription, easement appurtenant, easement in gross, easement of utility. An easement appurtenant runs with the land. It involves two parcels of land where the benefit, dominant, and the burden, servient, are attached to the real estate itself, meaning the easement transfers to any new owner automatically. Question 5. In real estate, what is the closest meaning to the term quieting a title? Clearing liens or encumbrances, transferring ownership, resolving boundary disputes, conducting an inspection. A quiet title action is a legal proceeding used to establish ownership and quiet any challenges or claims to the title. It is the primary way to clear clouds on a title, such as old liens, unreleased mortgages, or conflicting ownership claims. Question 6. What is the highest form of land ownership which includes the full and complete bundle of property rights? Fee simple defeasible, fee simple determinable, fee simple condition subsequent, fee simple absolute. Fee simple absolute is the greatest interest one can hold in real property. It is of indefinite duration, freely transferable, and inheritable. It includes the full bundle of rights: possession, control, exclusion, enjoyment, and disposition. Question 7. A triangular lot has a 1,200 feet base and 700 feet height. If it sells for $7.50/acre at an 8% commission, what is the payout? $578.51, $1,680.20, $2,520.05, $3,360. Calculation: area equals 1/2 base height equals 0.5 1,200 700 equals 420,000 square feet. Acres equals 420,000/43,560 equals 9.6418 acres. Total price equals 9.6418 $750 equals $7,231.40. Commission equals $7,231.40 0.08 equals $578.51. Question 8. Tom builds a $100,000 house in a $225,000 neighborhood. Which principle suggests his value will increase? Principle of regression, principle of progression, principle of substitution, principle of contribution. The principle of progression states that the value of a lower-end property is pulled upward by being surrounded by higher-valued properties. Conversely, regression is when a high-end home's value is pulled down by modest neighbors. Question 9. What are the implications of an unlicensed individual showing property, quoting prices, and accepting deposits? Legal if the agent consents. Illegal and leads to legal consequences. Permissible for property owners. Acceptable if no contract is signed. In almost all jurisdictions, it is a violation of law to perform any real estate activities, negotiating, showing, or handling money, without a valid license. This protection ensures that the public is only served by trained, regulated professionals. Question 10. What is the general purpose for cities to require building permits? Generate fee income for the city. Control the volume of building. Supersede deed restrictions. Ensure minimum construction standards. Building permits are a tool of the city's police power. Their primary goal is to ensure that all structures meet minimum safety and health standards, building codes, to protect the current and future occupants and the general public. Question 11. Which statement is true regarding the recording of a deed? It establishes ownership rights. It is strictly optional. It transfers mortgage responsibility. It protects against property taxes. Recording a deed provides constructive notice to the public. While a deed is valid when delivered/accepted, recording it in public records establishes the owner's legal priority against future claims and officially documents the transfer of title. Question 12. Eminent domain allows the city to take private land for a facility provided that no compensation is paid. Nothing is done if the owner objects. The owner is asked to donate. The owner is compensated. Under the Fifth Amendment, the Takings Clause, the government has the power of eminent domain to take private property for public use through a process called condemnation, but they must pay just compensation, fair market value. Question 13. The appraised value of a property is primarily based on comparable sales, a lower purchase price, none of these, exact determination of market value. An appraisal is an opinion of value. For residential real estate, the most reliable method is the sales comparison approach, which compares the subject property to similar properties, comparables, that have sold recently in the same area. Question 14. A report used to obtain a list price based on current listings, recent sales, and expireds is a CMA, Comparable Marketing Analytics, BPO, Broker Price Opinion, CMA, Comparative Market Analysis, AMA, Agent Market Analysis. A comparative market analysis, CMA, is a tool used by real estate agents to help a seller determine a listing price. It looks at three categories: active, the competition, sold, what buyers paid, and expired, what the market rejected. Question 15. What does marketable title or merchantable title refer to? Title free from defects and liens. Title with high market value. Commercial property title. Title granted to merchants. A marketable title is a title that is so clear of defects, liens, or clouds that a reasonable buyer would accept it and a lender would use it as collateral. It is a title that can be transferred without the fear of legal challenges. Question 16. Jay's Tire Store is built across from Big Bob's Tires. Which appraisal principle applies? Substitution, plottage, competition, progression. The principle of competition states that similar businesses located near each other can actually increase traffic and value for all. However, it also warns that excess competition can eventually reduce the net income of all parties involved. Question 17. If a landlord sells a property 10 days into a month after collecting rent, how is the rent handled at settlement? No prioration needed. Credited to the seller. Credited to the buyer. Divided based on days owned. Rent is typically paid in advance. Since the seller only owned the property for the first 10 days, they must give the buyer the rent for the remaining 20 days. This prioration ensures each party receives the income for the time they owned the land. Question 18. Which rule states that verbal discussions prior to a written contract are invalidated? Statute of frauds. Parole evidence rule. Doctrine of laches. Rescission. The parole evidence rule prevents a party from using oral statements to contradict or change the terms of a written contract. Once the contract is signed, the law assumes that the written document contains the final and complete agreement. Question 19. Which formula is used to determine value through the income approach? Value equals land plus construction. Value equals demand plus supply. Value equals GRM * monthly rent. Value equals appraised price closing costs. The gross rent multiplier, GRM, is a quick way to estimate value for small residential income properties. By multiplying the monthly rent by a market-derived multiplier, an investor can quickly compare the value of different rental units. Question 20. If a town has high demand but low housing supply and no new construction, prices will decline over time, remain stable, decline swiftly, increase. This is the fundamental law of supply and demand. When the supply of a commodity, housing, decreases or stays static while the demand, buyers, increases, the price of that commodity will inevitably rise. Question 21. Is a private owner's 3% down payment a violation of the Truth in Lending Act, TILA? Yes, price must be listed. No, owners are not regulated by TILA. Yes, terms are not disclosed. Yes, trigger terms used. TILA, implemented by Regulation Z, applies to creditors who regularly extend credit. A private homeowner selling their own home, FSBO, is not considered a lender under the Act and is therefore exempt from these specific advertising requirements. Question 22. At what point does legal title to real property transfer from the seller to the buyer? Offer acceptance, purchase agreement signing, closing or settlement, earnest money deposit. While a buyer gets equitable title when a contract is signed, legal title only transfers at the closing, settlement, when the deed is delivered by the grantor and accepted by the grantee. Question 23. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits race discrimination in residential, race discrimination in leasing, race discrimination in all real estate, race discrimination in commercial. The 1866 Act is a unique federal law because it has no exceptions. It prohibits all racial discrimination in the sale or rental of any property, residential, commercial, or land, across the entire United States. Question 24. Tom agrees to build a house for Jerry in 120 days. Before the house is completed, the contract is an option contract, an installment contract, a construction contract, an executory contract. An executory contract is one where some performance or obligation is still pending for both parties. Once the house is built and the money is paid at closing, the contract becomes executed. Question 25. A recorded servitude easement exists on a property. The owner sells to a buyer without disclosing it. What happens? Servitude remains valid. Servitude is terminated. Buyer must request a new one. Servitude becomes void. Because the servitude was properly recorded, the law assumes the buyer has constructive notice of it. Easements run with the land, meaning they remain attached to the title and are binding on all future owners. Question 26. Mike and Ike agree to an oral 2-year lease. If Ike breaches, is the lease enforceable? Yes, oral is binding. Yes, breach is a violation. No, oral leases are unenforceable. No, because notarization is required. The statute of frauds requires that any lease for a term longer than 1 year must be in writing to be enforceable in a court of law. Since this was a 2-year oral lease, it cannot be legally enforced. Question 27. A lender demands the full mortgage balance immediately because a borrower defaulted. This is judicial foreclosure, subordination clause, acceleration clause, escalation clause. The acceleration clause is a standard provision in a mortgage or deed of trust. It allows the lender to accelerate the maturity of the debt, making the entire balance due and payable immediately if the borrower fails to pay. Question 28. A 90x90 lot has setbacks, 30 feet front, 10 feet sides, 20 feet rear. What is the net building area? 2,800 square foot, 4,500 square foot, 5,400 square foot, 6,210 square foot. Calculation with equals 90 10 asterisk 2 equals 70 feet depth equals 90 30 plus 20 equals 40 feet net area equals 70 asterisk 40 equals 2,800 square feet per floor. Setbacks determine the building envelope where construction is permitted. Question 29. Which statement accurately describes a real estate mortgage? Conveys ownership to the lender. Security instrument / pledges collateral. Grants exclusive possession. Terminates on loan repayment. A mortgage is not the loan itself, it is the security for the loan. It creates a voluntary lien on the property, which gives the lender the right to foreclose, seize the property, if the borrower fails to repay the debt. Question 30. How are the numbers typically assigned on a range, used for rural addresses? Highest to lowest, north to south, west to east, lowest to highest. In the public land survey system, and many rural addressing systems, range lines run north/south and are numbered based on their distance east or west of a principal meridian. Addresses are typically assigned west to east.